Marcia Rocha. I work at the OECD. I lead a team called Climate Change Expert Group. The OECD has multiple roles, I would say. First, because we are producing knowledge that pertains to the climate change challenge. I think many of our reports can inform the way forward in terms of transition and transformation. We do have the group that I lead called Climate Change Expert Group. It's a group that work in parallel, so this is an OECD group, OECD IEA ad hoc group. This group is not part of the UNFCCC process, but it very much works towards informing the negotiations processes within the UNFCCC. So the way it's organized is that we hold 2 forums per year on topics that pertain to climate negotiations, sticking points, so really topics where we negotiators and countries identify that they could use more space to negotiate. It's not the formal negotiations, official negotiations, it's a neutral space for countries to exchange on those issues and really can benefit from that extra time, let's say, to exchange on those views. And we produce technical papers to support those discussions. We inform our own work because we always talk about consistency to Paris temperature goals. We wanted to look at what this actually means in terms of emissions. So because the language in the Paris Agreement is internationally agreed, this is international legal language, we took that language, we translated the language into a set of criteria considering the different dimensions of the agreement, not just 2 degrees and 1.5, or not just the emissions goal, but also the fact that the ultimate goal of the Convention and of the Paris Agreement is to avoid the most dangerous impacts of climate change. So considering really the latest impact science as well, into a set of criteria that we use then to filter the current library, the most recent library of climate change mitigation scenarios, to come up with ranges or global benchmarks of scenarios that are then Paris aligned. So the goal of this work is really to set up a framework that can evolve over time. So with new scenarios, we can reevaluate those ranges and really to have a framework that allows us to talk about Paris alignment when it is Paris aligned, and to avoid talking about something that is Paris aligned when it's not. So we did this in a very systematic and robust way, and this has many applications. So we held a few events building on this work. So one application, for example, has been to sort of match those ranges that we came up with these set of criteria to the scenarios that are currently most commonly used within the private sector, the financial sector, for target setting or for assessment of alignment. And what we find is that few of these criteria really meet all the criteria. Few of these scenarios really meet all the criteria that we set up in order to evaluate Paris Agreement. So this is work to inform ambition. We stay very much at the global level. We do not look into regional or sectoral implications yet from these benchmarks, but this is work that is really the basis for everything that we do in terms of alignment. And this is very relevant also for countries to inform countries in their process of preparing new NDCs by 2025. So all this work is intertwined. So there's no way around it. NDC ambition needs to be increased substantially. So what comes out of the work on the scenarios and also from the IPCC reports is that emissions need to be halved by 2030, by the end of this decade. So this is an absolutely critical decade to prevent the most dangerous impacts of climate change. And this is mainly considering, for example, the fact that we can already cross climate tipping points at much lower levels of warming than we previously thought. So already at ranges that are in line with the Paris Agreement range of between 1.5 and 2 degrees of warming. Several tipping points can be crossed, and it's only by really limiting the overshoot of 1.5, so the extent of overshoot and the duration of that overshoot, that we can very safely avoid crossing some of these very dangerous and irreversible tipping points, for example. So, and what we see with our scenarios is that so this overshoot is very much dependent on how much emissions we emit between now and 2030. So NDCs by 2030 need to be strengthened. NDCs by 2035 need to lead the way to net zero to 2050. So there's no way around it. This is unequivocal. And so, yeah, the negotiations, we hope that the outcome of the Global Stocktake, which has this main purpose of informing the new cycle of NDCs by 25, we are hoping for an outcome that is operationalizable, that really gives the political signal that we need, concrete and with a timeline for countries to really use this outcome to inform their NDCs. So as usual with the negotiations, we don't know until we know, right? So a lot can happen within these 3 days. This is like really the culmination of year-long negotiations on all those different streams. And that happened in the past, that even when we have a deadlock 2 days before the end, things still move and we still get to good outcomes at the end. So I think clearly here in Dubai, this is a global stocktake year. A strong outcome of the global stocktake can really go a long way in enhancing ambition of NDCs by 2025 and really to create more trust amongst parties. So currently, if we look at the text at the moment, again, we don't know until we know. It's until the gavel is, we hear the gavel that we know what happened, but currently the text on mitigation, it does provide quite clear direction of travel, sort of like goalposts with the new renewable targets and the energy efficiency targets, so tripling global renewable capacity by 2030 and the same doubling energy efficiency by 2030. Those are very useful goalposts because first they have a timeline, and second they are really concrete in terms of providing a investment signal in renewables. So these can go a long way helping countries to transition really. Very useful as well would be to get some language on phasing out of fossil fuels. It's absolutely unequivocal from the science that we need to phase out fossil fuels, all fossil fuels, not just unabated fossil fuels. This is a little bit of language that has been floating that around that the phase out only needs to be the phase out of unabated fossil fuel. Those are false. It's a bit of a distraction, and those are false solutions. The phase out needs to really be of all fossil fuel and to fully transform energy systems and transition into renewables. So those are political signals and that this COP has the opportunity to give, and we definitely hoping for that. Next year, the negotiations on NDC features will resume. These are politically very contentious, and of course I cannot speak in the name of the parties. I think what is clear is not only that we need to enhance ambition in NDCs, but we also, and I think parties recognize that, we also need to enhance and improve the quality of NDCs and find better and more systematic way for monitoring progress towards NDCs. This is also within the Paris Agreement. We need to monitor this progress. So in having NDCs that are, for example, economy-wide targets, absolute targets versus BAU or sectoral targets, actually allow for better and easier tracking. So with enhancing NDCs, we're talking about ambition, but we are also talking about enhancing transparency. So there is already some guidance on clarity and transparency and understanding of NDCs that parties need to submit when they submit their NDC. The negotiations in features which need to resume and also conclude next year will look into potentially these common aspects of NDCs that could be shared across parties. Of course, it's not about having a complete top-down. We will never go back to Kyoto-type targets. We've moved on from that. We have a bottom-up approach within the Paris Agreement, but it would be it would be useful to have some aspects in common with our NDCs. For example, if we are talking about a global renewable target goal, should new NDCs provide an explanation of the approach to transitioning into renewable targets. All countries, it's kind of like accepted now that we will reach net zero by mid-century. So how can NDCs or NDCs levels put forward by countries can be reconciled with those longer term trajectories? So those are things that could be discussed within these new negotiations on features that would definitely help better understand NDCs and better monitor them.